And I think one thing that I've come to realize with myself, and I find, you just mentioned 45 days, right? Or 75 hard. It's like you think about if you've been morbidly overweight and the idea of like, I'm going to eat healthy and be perfect for 75 days. The idea of that from day one feels so overwhelming. You don't even know what to do with it. Monumental, right? So what I found that has a lot of success, bring it back on the mindset is I set goal. Of course I have long-term, medium-term goals, but most of my goals are set on a daily basis. What am I going to do today? What am I going to do? I can do anything in a day, right? If it's like, if my goal is not to eat a cookie, for example, like, the thought of like, I'm not going to eat cookies for months. Like, I'm already subconsciously telling myself I'm going to find myself craving cookies, right? But it's like, no, I'm going to eat a cookie today. I'm not going to eat a cookie today, just today.
Yeah.
Today we're recording this on a Tuesday. So if I woke up this morning, like, I'm not going to eat a cookie on Tuesday, I can do that for a day.
Yeah.
So we could do anything for a day.
Right.
So I think like again, it's the mind. How can we trick ourselves? How can we find ways to like reprogram, change the story? And you say, this comes back to choice. Is there a different way of looking at it? And I think, again, one of the questions you asked what I do is like, I try to be really curious around why I do what I do, especially if I start to fall back into limiting beliefs, or it's like, wait a minute.
Where'd this come from?
Where
am I feeling it?
So it's having curiosity. So for example, food, even today, if I get triggered, food, the initial thing is food. I mean, it's 40 plus years of that. It doesn't go away overnight.
Yeah.
But it's still there. So there's moments really where I'll catch myself in a trance, and then I'll get to the cupboard, and then I stop. And then I have a conversation with myself. It's like, Adam, is this really what you want?
Yeah.
Are you hungry? So I'm getting curious and I'm asking myself questions. And the reality is like, I'm just triggered. I have anxious. It's like, is there something else better that's actually going to fill your cup more? Because the truth is, you get in the cycle, we go to addictive behaviors of whatever that happens to be. And we're seeking fulfillment or relief, but it's the cycle. Then we feel guilt and shame around it. Right. That's the cycle of addiction.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just taking the opportunity to pause and get curious. And I have conversations with myself. So, I mentioned earlier, like the conscious and the subconscious side. So I used to belittle that side of it. What I've learned is if we have those negative thoughts that come up, that's telling us we can't do something, or we shouldn't do this, or don't do that. If you're literally telling ourselves like, be quiet, don't do it, you're literally throwing gasoline on the fire.
Right.
And so the example I use, what works for me is the subconscious is like our inner child. So I've actually called him Nuge. It used to be a very derogatory name. Nuge was my high school nickname, right? So to me, it's like, it's the teenager, it's the younger version of me. So I literally, in my head, I'm like, all right, Nuge. It's like, I hear you, because kids want to be seen too. So think of that little boy in us, right? That wants to be seen, wants to be heard, especially by mom and dad and others around him. If you acknowledge it, just say, hey, Nuge, I hear you, but that doesn't work for us. So I'm having these conversations, and all of a sudden that voice in my head, that part of me that's pushing me to do something that I know is not going to bring, me fulfillment, it's temporary comfort, I'm actually able to acknowledge that side of me and then bring both the conscious and the subconscious in alignment, and then I'm making conscious decisions. So it's almost like, Nuge, I got you. I've got us.
Yeah.
And I've found that like, if you acknowledge it, that voice, it wants to be heard. It wants to be seen.
Can we talk more about this? Because I'm practicing this right now. Then Nuge, and I've got my little Robbie over there. Little Robbie will say, well, you've tried this before, and that didn't work. You've tried it. My little voice argues back. You've gone down this road before. Just get the donut. Just get the fucking donut. It's just a donut. It's not that big of a deal. No one will know. Like that little voice. And so like bringing, what I'm asking you is like, I have these conversations. I'm becoming conscious of that. And my goal is to say, all right, Robbie, you know what? I appreciate your opinion. I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm grateful for you, but I got this. Thank you. Like give them the gratitude and move on. Not easy.
No. So let's be clear. It's not easy, right? But it starts with awareness. And the reality is with food, it's like, I'm not perfect with my eating. Like I still slip back. Whatever that happens to be, I just don't beat myself up for it anymore. I don't. And if I pull myself down, I'm able to pull myself out of it quicker. I think that's where true consciousness comes in. No one's going to flip a switch overnight and be a completely different person from one day going forward forever. It doesn't work like that. There has to be grace and understanding that we're going to fall back into old patterns. We're going to fall back into old beliefs, especially if it's a story we've been telling ourselves for our entire life.
Right.
To think that like I've been doing this way for 40 some odd years, and all of a sudden the next day I'm just not going to be tempted or want to do all these things. That's not even a reality. And so your donut example, little Robbie wants, no, we're getting the donut. You're going to give in and get the donut. right?
Yeah.
But the key is of using the donut as an example. It's like, look over a 6-month period. It's like, let's say that it's been a daily thing for you. You get a donut every day, and all of a sudden you're becoming more conscious and you're having that conversation with yourself. It's like, oh, we only did it 3 times this week, right? And we were there for a while. Then it's like, oh my gosh, we only did it 2. And then all of a sudden, with time, you're like, oh my God, I don't even think about the donut. Just becomes something that's not there, because as you continue to pull away from it, that's where the magic happens. And that's the hardest part of all of it. It's that initial like pulling away from old beliefs and patterns that truly aren't serving us consciously, and trying to up level. It's the pain of embodying that. It's that integration that takes the time.
Seems to me,
And that's where most people get lost.
well, and I think this is and you're saying this. What I'm hearing you say is that you have an ability to give yourself grace on the success that you're having, where my inner Robbie, he's a black and white thinker. Like, you either did it or you didn't. You failed or you succeeded. There's no middle ground. And what you're saying is there's a lot of middle ground. I only had donuts 3 times this week, and that's a huge victory over 6 times, 7 times in a week, right?
Yeah.
And it's coming to this grace. I think there's an emotional intelligence aligned with that kind of thinking that is something that I am always working on. I'm always working on the gain, staying in the gain rather than the gap. Have you read that book? That's another great book. The Gap.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it though.
The Gap and the Gain. I live in the gap. Oh man, I did really good today, but I could have done better if I only had 3 donuts this week, but I said I was not going to eat donuts for the rest of the year. It was my resolution. It's like my space that I'm really good at.
So one, I mentioned earlier, I had a plant medicine experience around this whole thing, right? So again, little Robbie, Nuge, whatever we're going to call it. It's like, and I don't care what the science says. It's whatever. At the end of the day, it's like our mind. I think the irony in this, there's, we talk about people that have schizophrenia. I joke that we all have schizophrenia. They're just saying out loud what we're telling ourselves inside of our head, right? But I had this whole thing around my 13-year-old son, and in the medicine, it was showing like how hard I am on myself and the stories that I tell myself. And it's like, showing me, it's like, would you ever talk to your 13-year-old son the way you talk to yourself?
Wow.
And I'm literally in this just crying uncontrollably and just feeling like I would never talk to my son, let alone anyone else in the world, the way I beat myself up around this stuff. Right. So I think when you can, to me, that's why it just resonates with me. When I can look at that side of me is like my younger version of myself. And it's like, and then actually being able to see like a 12 or 13-year-old version of me, like, Nuge, you got this, buddy.
Yeah.
And then putting the picture of my son, visually seeing my son. Would I ever talk to my son that way? Then why the hell do I talk to myself that way?
That's powerful.
So I think, again, you mentioned earlier, one of the things like with your, with your club and everything is talking about, setting intentions and visions and like manifesting and looking at all these things. I think part of that is getting curious. It's looking at things from a different set of lenses, right? There's always 2 sides to a coin. There's the yin to the yang, and one person can see it one way, one person can see it another. I don't know why this is coming to mind. My boy's mom, so my ex-wife's, both her parents passed away from Parkinson's. They both had Parkinson's. And I remember when her dad passed away, watching my co-parents' family deal with the death of their father who had Parkinson's. And at the same time, I had a client at the time whose husband had Parkinson's and died. And I watched 2 families that both experienced death right around the same time have completely different experiences around it.
Really?
Completely different experiences. Like and not to say that there wasn't loss and sorrow on the other sides of it, right? But I watched one family go into the depths of despair, and it just spiraled out of control, implode. The other family created euphoria, and like they're in a better place. It was the same thing, but their story around the death was very different, even though they both experienced death. Same thing. So it's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, again, if we can get curious, if there's something in our life that we don't like, or someone that's showing up, maybe change the story. Just get curious. Like, maybe there's something else to see that I'm not seeing. And I believe if we can get curious first and foremost, the curiosity slows down the brain. The curiosity helps pull us out of the mindlessness and starts to give us a different perspective to potentially start making more conscious decisions or potentially better decisions that serve us. At the end of the day, whatever story we're telling ourselves around something is what's going to happen, right? So what you feel is like the most, Rob, you might have a story around something that's the most painful thing in the world. You can't believe it, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is like, I could see it from a completely different perspective. It's just my perspective.
Yeah.
Does it make mine better than yours? No. But at the same time, if a lot of pain and suffering that we experience, especially as men, it's the story in our head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And all you have
change.
to do is
And again, right? I did a post about this a few weeks ago. It's like, if you want change, it starts with a choice. Period. So we can overcomplicate all the reasons why not, but at the end of the day, it starts with a choice. Again, we overcomplicate everything, and I just think I'm finding in my own life the humor in it. I mean, I truly believe whatever you believe God is. I think God laughs at us a lot. It's like, you guys, like,
Silly kids.
are you
genuinely
for
believe
real,
that.
right? You're gonna figure this thing out, and I think magic happens when you can start to play with it.
I like the curiosity. I think that's an amazing perspective because it does. We don't ask ourselves that. I am mad. Why are you mad? I don't know why I'm mad. Like there's a lot of people that I see every day driving down I-15 who are angry, and I want to ask them, why are you mad? They don't know why they're mad. They haven't slowed down enough to consider all or whatever it is that's cooking. You know what I mean? That's pretty powerful.
Rob, why would somebody want to watch this podcast?
Why wouldn't you? We have a good time. You're going to learn something. And by the way, it's awesome. You should click it. You should watch it. Thanks for tuning in.
Subscribe right now.